I got a real bad stutter today. The jump cuts in this are going to be crazy. Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Damn Canada by me, Dee Dee. If you're new here, hi, hello, and welcome. It is great to have you. Here on Damn Canada, we like to cover all the lesser-known murder, mystery, and mayhem cases that go on here in Canada, and Canada only. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, then I hope I see you around again. So with the summer months fast approaching, many of us just can't wait to start enjoying all the things that these warmer months have to offer. And one of the most popular summer activities is camping. Lots of people go camping to get away from the hustle and bustle of everyday life and all of that stress and struggles that come with that. Unfortunately, for a group of friends that was trying to do just that, their spontaneous camping trip would leave them, their families, and communities with a whole new form of stress, worry, and all of the things that come with having a family member or friend go missing. Christina Calayca was born December 19th, 1986 in Toronto, Ontario, to her mother Elizabeth Rutledge and her father Mario Calayca. Elizabeth had immigrated to Canada in 1980 from Mindanao, I think I'm saying that right, in the Philippines, and had a large, close-knit Filipino family here in Canada. When Christina was around 1 year old, her parents divorced, and she was mainly raised by her strong and independent mother. A few years later, when Christina was around 4 or 5 years old, her mother gave birth to her younger brother, Michael Rutledge. Christina absolutely adored her younger brother, and she loved him dearly and took on almost a second mother role, caring for him and doing things like paying for his self-defense lessons and other lessons as he got older. Christina's mother, Elizabeth, was also a devout Catholic and raised her children in her Catholic Filipino community. And Christina really took to this religion, and everything she did as she grew up revolved around the church. She spent a lot of her free time at the church or volunteering with the church as she grew up. She also was an amazing student, excelling all through high school, and when she graduated from high school, she decided to get her early childhood education certificate at George Brown College. Through college, her mother was on that grind, working hard as hell to put her child through college, and she had started her own financial advisor business, but she was also working odd jobs as much as possible, like working at the retirement home and working as a cashier at Walmart. When Christina graduated from George Brown with her ECE certificate in 2006, she started working full-time 9-hour days at St. Bernadette's daycare, which in turn gave her a steady paycheck. Christina and her mother had an extremely close bond, and she was forever grateful for all of the hard work her mother did over the years, just to make sure Christina succeeded in all of her aspirations. So Christina took half of every paycheck and gave it to her mother as a thank you and to help with the bills and everything, and so that her mother can quit all of her side jobs and focus solely on her financial advisor business. Along with Christina working 9-hour days at St. Bernadette's, she was also a leader with Youth for Christ, a Christian organization that has a large Filipino community, and volunteered endlessly with another affiliated youth ministry. And to add to her already very busy schedule, her mother's 50th birthday was being held on July 28th of 2007, and Christina was organizing the whole thing, which was a huge task. And just like everything Christina put her heart into, her mother's birthday party was absolutely amazing. But after all of that, Christina was hitting burnout pretty hard and needed a little vacation. Not to mention, she had plans to do missionary work in the Philippines and go on a trip to Panama with her family before she started teacher's college at York University. She was just go, go, go all the time. So she talked with her friend group, which included her cousin Faith Castulo, Edward Meeg, who went by Eddie, and Joe Benedict Reyes, who went by JB. And I am sorry if I said any of those names wrong, but I will have them on the screen to show you what I was trying to say. The group initially wanted to go to Montreal because there was a youth conference that they wanted to attend. They were all part of the Youth for Christ Christian group, which I believe is how they all knew each other, besides Christina and Faith, who of course were cousins. But the hotels ended up being too expensive, and they felt like it was too short notice to reach out to one of their friends that lived in Montreal and ask to stay with them. And so, with the Montreal thing not working out, they decided, why don't we go on a little camping trip? They jumped onto Google like one does and started looking up Ontario parks with waterfalls and decided to go with Rainbow Falls. Rainbow Falls Provincial Park is a beautiful park located right along the Trans-Canada Highway, about 2 hours east of Thunder Bay, which is the closest biggest city. It's also situated in between the village of Rossport and the town of Schreiber, and on the north shore of Lake Superior. The park is made up of 2 camping areas. The main one is White Sand Lake Campground, and the other is the Rossport Campground, which is much smaller. There's lots to do at this park, like take advantage of the beautiful beaches and water, or check out the gorgeous waterfall that the park is named after. The park also has about 5 hiking trails, which each have a different level of difficulty. There are 3 trails that are listed at being around an hour long, and they are named the Back 40 Lookout Trail, Rainbow Falls Trail, and Lake Superior Trail. A more difficult trail that more experienced hikers can take is the Schreiber Channel segment of the Cask Isles Trail, aka the Voyager Hiking Trail. And should I leave it? I'm going to leave it. I don't want to get up. Okay, what was I saying? A more difficult trail that more experienced hikers can take is the Schreiber Channel segment of the Cask Isles Trail, aka the Voyager Hiking Trail, which is 13 kilometers long and takes about 5 to 6 hours. And finally, there is the Cask Isles Hiking Trail, aka the Voyager Hiking Trail that I just mentioned. Then this hiking trail spans a distance of 53 kilometers, and it's rated one of the top 10 best hiking trails in Ontario. This hike takes an estimated 5 days and starts in Terrace Bay and weaves along the north shore of Lake Superior, runs through Schreiber, tracks through Rainbow Falls, and ends in Rossport. Many people choose to just do the Rainbow Falls to Rossport part of the trail, though, which is about 14 kilometers long. Now, if you are familiar with Ontario, you might be aware that Rainbow Falls is quite the distance from Toronto, about a 12 to 13 hour drive north to be exact. Not only had Christina and her friends never been that far away from home before, but they were not experienced campers, and I do think it's safe to say that they were not experienced outdoors people in general. The type of camping that they were used to was done in cottages in Peterborough, and Rainbow Falls is a tent RV type camping place. And on top of that, the group of friends also got lost a few weeks prior while on the Seton hiking trail near Oshawa. Now, that whole getting lost on the trail thing really shook Christina, with her saying that she was praying that they would get out alive while lost. And speaking about how terrified she was to her friends and family afterwards. And so for this group to pick this tent type camping so far away was a bit out of the ordinary for them. But hey, everyone has to start somewhere, and so no judgment here. And so the group booked a camping spot at Rainbow Falls for a Sunday, August 5th, and got ready for their little mini vacay. Their plans were to leave at 10 a.m. on Saturday, August 4th, although I did read some reports that they left at 3 or 5 a.m., so I'm not positive which one it was. But anyways, the group was planning to travel in Eddie's 1992 Toyota Corolla, but when Eddie, Faith, and JB pulled up to Christina's house in Eddie's beat-up car, Christina's mother really didn't like the looks of it, and so she insisted that they would take her Honda CR-V instead. And so the group moved their packed belongings from the Toyota Corolla to Elizabeth's CR-V. And after Christina and her mother exchanged hugs and said, "I love you," the group was off on their vacation. As they traveled the 13 hours, they decided to stop around Sault Ste. Marie to nap in the car. And then near Wawa, they ended up running out of gas, which postponed their trip a little bit. Luckily, a good Samaritan named Ian came around and helped them out, and they were able to be on their way again. And I just wanted to make a side note that I noticed some people found it odd that they ran out of gas, but I just wanted to point out that this was 2007, like MapQuest days. Do you remember MapQuest? Do you remember MapQuest? And so it's not like they were able to jump on their phone and see when the nearest gas station would be. Once you're past Sudbury, the gas stations are very few and far between, even in today's day and age. And if they didn't know that they should probably top up in Sault Ste. Marie, I can definitely see them running out of gas in Wawa or anywhere. And on top of that, this was their first big road trip and traveling in this part of Ontario. And coming from Toronto with gas stations all over the place, they probably didn't even have the thought of, will there be gas stations along the Trans-Canada Highway? And if I had to guess, I would probably bet that they assumed that there would be more en routes through the highway, because there is a lot of en routes from Innisfil to Windsor, but after that there's none. But if you don't know that, then you can end up being pretty screwed. I also seen people questioning the Good Samaritan Ian for stopping and thinking that that was sus, but that's not really an uncommon thing up here. If you're a local and you see someone out on the side of the road and you know that there's not anything around for quite a few kilometers, and they don't look suspicious, of course, you're more than likely not going to stop and pull over just to see if they need help or anything like that. It's kind of just the way things and people are up here. So after their little gas delay in Wawa, they stopped to check out the Nays Provincial Park, and then they got groceries in Schreiber. Then at 12 p.m. on Sunday, August 5th, they arrived at Rainbow Falls Provincial Park. They pulled into the park and were assigned to campsite 72. But when they arrived at the campsite, they found that it was right along the main road of the campground, and so no privacy. So they went back up to the front and asked if they could switch campsites, and luckily they were able to switch to campsite 88, which was much more private. And I say luckily because it was the long weekend. And on top of that, Terrace Bay had their annual Drag Fest going on, which takes place across 3 days and was gaining popularity fairly quickly since the first event in I believe 1999. And so the park was actually quite busy, with 3/4 of the 97 campsites filled. So they made their way to campsite 88 and set up their tents and area, and then they just hung around the campsite for a little while, just taking pictures, relaxing, and they ended up having a little bonfire, making some pasta, and then around 6:30 p.m. they decided to take a nap because they were exhausted from that 26-hour journey. So exhausted, in fact, that they didn't wake up to Eddie's alarm he set for 30 minutes later. That, or the alarm just didn't go off. Either way, they all got a good long nap in and woke up 4 hours later around 10:30 p.m. Since it was dark out now, and if you've never been up in the bush, since it was 10 p.m. and dark out now, and if you've never been out into the bush when it's like nighttime, you literally can't see your hand in front of your face if you don't have any lights around. That's how dark it is. And so they decided to hang around their campsite, and they had a bonfire and hung out, had a few drinks, and had the rest of their pasta, and documented their fun time by taking pictures. Christina was finally getting that R&R that she truly deserved. The last photo taken of Christina was at 12:08 a.m. for Monday, August 6th, and she looked to be having a great time. The group all hung out together until around 3 a.m. Then Eddie decided that he wanted to go to the comfort stations to take a shower. So Eddie headed off to the comfort station, and when he returned back around 30 minutes later, around 3:30 a.m., everyone seemed to have gone to sleep because there was nobody up around the bonfire and it was completely quiet. Eddie stayed up for just a little, just warming up and drying off by the fire. And then shortly after, he crawled into the tent, and Christina jokingly whispered, "Let's go swimming," before saying, "Just kidding, it's so dark," before they giggled and drifted off to sleep. Just 2.5 hours later, around 6:30 a.m., Christina and Eddie both woke up and were wide awake. They were so pumped and full of energy and just anxious to go and do something. To be 20 again. Faith and JB were still sound asleep in their sleeping bags, and Christina asked if Eddie would walk her up to the comfort stations. After they are finished up and on their way back to the campsite, one of them suggested going for a jog. Eddie has said he forgets who suggested it, but my best bet would be that it was Eddie that did suggest the jog, seeing as how he was the one training to be a firefighter, and Christina actually had an injury to her foot, which caused her actually a great deal of pain even standing for a long period of time. A few years prior, she had stepped on a needle, but she didn't get it checked out right away, and unfortunately, since she waited so long, after it was removed, it left a hard inflamed callus. So when it came to running or standing for a long time, that callus would end up causing her pain. When it came to getting in shape or anything like that, she preferred volleyball, which she would play with Faith and another cousin. So whoever brought up the jog first, both of them were into the idea, and they started off on their jog just discussing which way they wanted to go. Eddie wanted to run along the Trans-Canada Highway, but Christina wanted to stay in the park. And with neither of them compromising and sticking together, they reached the front gate and the road that branches off to the falls. Christina asked Eddie how long he planned to run for, and Eddie jokingly said, "I'm going to run until I die." And so without any real answer to that question or coming up with a meet-up time or spot, they headed off in their separate directions. Eddie towards the Trans-Canada Highway and Christina headed down the road towards the falls. Eddie ran along the highway towards the Rossport campground, and he ended up taking a break at a picnic area and carved the group's collective initials into a rock, FCJE, then turned back the way he came. Eddie returned back to campsite 88 about an hour later and found that Faith and JB were still sound asleep, and Christina had not returned yet. He sat in one of the camping chairs, and as he waited for Christina to return and for the others to wake up, he himself drifted in and out of sleep while sitting in his chair. At 9:30 a.m., Faith and JB woke up, and of course they noticed that Eddie was at the campsite, but Christina was not. They of course asked where she was, and Eddie explained the morning and how they took separate runs, and when he returned an hour later, Christina was still not back yet, and she still hadn't returned. At this point, it had been about 3 hours since Eddie had last seen Christina, but the group wasn't worried yet. Faith suggested that she was probably just off on her own, taking her own private time. Christina was known to like being by herself occasionally. While they waited for Christina, Eddie and Faith started preparing breakfast, and JB headed to the comfort station to take a shower. Eddie suggested that JB check out the nearby beach for Christina on his way back afterwards. So JB went to the showers and then went to the beach to check for Christina, but he didn't see her there. He returned back to the campsite alone with no updates on Christina, so the group finished up eating and decided it was time that they really started looking for her. By this point, it was now 11 a.m., and Christina was last seen at 6:30 a.m. They were starting to get worried now. Eddie and JB hopped into Elizabeth's CRV and drove up the road Eddie last seen her walking down until they reached the parking lot near the falls. Eddie told JB to go down the hiking trail that headed off left, which was the Lake Superior Trail, while Eddie ran down the Rainbow Falls Trail. Eddie reached the end of the trail where it turned west, and he asked a woman on the trail where it led to, and she informed him that the trail goes all the way to Rossport. Eddie returned back to the parking lot to find JB waiting at the vehicle, alone. They returned back to campsite 88 where Faith was waiting just in case Christina had come back. They took a little rest, then wrote a note for Christina, marking the note's time at 1:45 p.m. Then all three of them got into the CRV this time and figured Christina probably walked to that town Rossport that the lady had mentioned, and they were going to go there and check to see if she was there. Not being familiar with this area at all and not having any sort of GPS or anything like that, they went to the park gate and asked about trail maps. The attendant asked them what their plans were and such, and while talking, the group informed the first person all day that they were looking for their missing friend. Like I had mentioned, the park was booked up 3/4 of the way full, so there was a lot of people there that weekend walking around, but the group never thought to ask anyone if they had seen Christina or anything like that, which I'm sure they feel bad enough about, and so I'm just gonna leave it at that. The attendant, finding out a camper was missing, informed them that they needed to call the OPP and report her as a missing person, since there was just no way she did the 5 to 6 hour, 12-kilometer distance hike to Rossport, completely unprepared. While the group did as instructed, the attendant also jumped on the phone and started making calls. The park personnel immediately started a preliminary search of the trails and beaches while waiting for the OPP to arrive. The OPP arrived at the park promptly and immediately started a search for Christina. And 2 hours later at 4 p.m., Monday, August 6th, Elizabeth received that call that every parent hopes to never get. Your daughter, Christina, is missing. Elizabeth knew that the group was going camping up north, but she didn't know that they were going 13 hours away up to Rainbow Falls. And so, with wanting to get there as fast as possible, Elizabeth booked a flight to the falls ASAP, and she arrived in Rainbow Falls the next day on Tuesday by plane and was met by Constable Keith Jones. Elizabeth, of course, was crying, although you wouldn't have known since the sky had turned dark and it was downpouring, mixing tears with rain. One of the OPP officers noticed that Elizabeth was religious, and so he called Father Raul Escarp, I hope I'm saying that right, who was a minister in Terrace Bay, to see if he could come to the park and speak with her. Father Raul wasted no time and arrived in the park within 30 minutes. As soon as Father Raul drove into the park, he noticed the Youth for Christ bumper sticker that belonged to Elizabeth and immediately suspected that he was meeting a fellow Filipino. He knew that the Youth for Christ organization had been founded in Manila. And after speaking with Elizabeth a little bit more, he found out that they were actually both from the same island, Mindanao. By the time Elizabeth arrived at the park, the OPP Northwest Region Emergency Response Team was in a full-scale search for Christina. And they were actually in a full-scale search for Christina within hours of her being reported to the OPP. They wasted no time at all and set up a command post near White Sand Lake, and they called in canine units for assistance as well. In the most ideal situation, the dogs would be out within 12 hours of a person going missing, and they would also have perfect weather conditions, like as in no rain and anything like that. Unfortunately, the 4 canines and their handlers arrived about 24 hours after Christina was reported missing, which is, of course, well outside the 12-hour mark. And so even though the weather conditions were perfect for the dogs, no scent was ever picked up. Over the following days, a total of 2 helicopters, 2 fixed-wing aircrafts, 1 float plane, 100 officers, firefighters, and trained civilians joined in on the search. They also busted out the best of the best that Northwest Ontario had to offer when it came to technology. They used GPS mapping software to track search routes, side-scanning sonar for underwater searching, and infrared cameras that would let them see all the live creatures in the park. And although they did find plenty of moose, bear, and wolves, there was no trace of Christina. The search covered the entire 53-kilometer Cask Isles Trail, and along with that, the main area being searched was extended out 8 kilometers from the spot where Christina was last seen. They picked an 8-kilometer distance because statistics showed that 90% of the time people lost in the bush in this area were found within that distance of where they went missing. The water running down to Lake Superior was also searched, and by the 4th day of the search, they had extended the search far past the initial 8-kilometer zone. And at this point, they were looking for signs of literally anything. Stacked up rocks, a smoke signal, any kind of little signal, any kind of colors amongst the green bush, but nothing came of it. They also went to areas that had more bird activity in case the birds were around Christina, but that also came up empty-handed. There was absolutely no sign of where Christina went. She just simply vanished. The Rainbow Falls Park is extremely well maintained, and on top of that, the bush is so thick that it is next to impossible just to walk through. And so if she did go off the trail, there would have been some kind of markings in the bush to suggest that. But there was no signs anywhere that Christina possibly wandered off the trail into the thick bush. Not to mention, she had a fear of getting lost and also had a phobia of rodents and insects. The only thing that's ever been found that's been mentioned was that a pair of socks were found below the falls near a 35-foot deep swimming hole, along with a footprint in a mossy area close by. But these things were never linked to Christina, and it's never been reported if these socks were DNA tested to see if they were Christina's or not. And realistically, with it being a public park, that could have literally been anyone's socks. So even though a half dozen of Christina's family members drove up to the park and arrived very shortly after Elizabeth, they weren't permitted to assist with the search. This was extremely frustrating to them, but this is done in order to preserve any evidence and make sure that the professionals are the ones searching. There is a lot of training that goes into search and rescue, and you need to know what to look for, like branches being broken a certain way, signs of things. And you definitely need to know how to handle evidence properly. Evidence can be tampered with so easily if you don't know what you're doing. Or if you do know what you're doing, it could potentially be the key to a case. Just as an example, there's a case I'm working on for the future where the evidence was found in water. And because the evidence was extracted properly, which was actually done by scooping up the evidence and all of the surrounding water with it, and not actually just taking the evidence right out of the water, it literally helped solve this case. If that evidence would have just been picked right up out of the water and then bagged up, it would have been destroyed and the case could have possibly never been solved. And I'm just bringing this up as an example to kind of explain how important it is to know all those little details when it comes to stuff like this and searching and rescuing and all of that, if that makes sense. Anyway, so like I was saying, the family was pissed about not being able to help. And actually, along with them, the neighboring communities really wanted to help in any way they possibly could as well. This was one of those situations where everyone was feeling very compelled to come and help out. And so a civilian search was organized for the following weekend once the search was opened up to the public. And on Saturday, August 11th, 100 residents from Terrace Bay, Schreiber, Rossport, Marathon, and a bus from Thunder Bay all arrived to assist with a grid search organized by Fire Chief Tracy Anderson. And the search continued on into Sunday, and the next day, and the next day. And soon it had been 17 days of searching for Christina Calayca, one of the longest searches in that region's history. And with 17 days passing with absolutely zero leads, the OPP had to do what they feared most: call off the search without any results. On that day, August 23rd, Christina Calayca became part of the 5% of people that go missing in this area and are never found. And the only person to ever go missing and not be found at Rainbow Falls. The only other person to ever go missing at Rainbow Falls was an elderly lady in her 70s who was also in poor health. And she was found within 9 hours, and that was 6 years prior to Christina's disappearance. People that know this park get lost themselves trying to wrap their head around how anyone could go missing in this park. It's just not the type of place that you can get lost in. The 3 remaining friends were questioned extensively by the police, with Eddie getting the most focus, of course. After all, he was the last one to see Christina. But eventually, they were all ruled out and are not suspects in this case. One theory the police really started to cling to was that Christina was attacked by a wild animal, since there was tons of black bears and wolves in the area. The OPP wanted a second opinion on this theory, though, and so they flew out a bear expert to the park for consultation. But this theory was ultimately ruled out as well, and let me tell you why. There are over 900,000 black bears in North America, and since the year 2000, there have been an average of 2 black bear fatalities a year across all of North America. They also thought maybe it was the wolves, but wolves are actually very misunderstood creatures and have an even more unlikely chance of attacking a human. And on top of all that, for both of these animals, or like any wild animal, there would have been a clear spot of attack. There would have been blood, there would have been drag marks, there would have been something to indicate that there was an attack. But nothing of that sort was ever found throughout the 17 days of searching. With the possibility of an animal attack being ruled out and absolutely no sign of Christina being in the park, it really only leaves us with one reasonable scenario, which is probably the most terrifying and bone-chilling of them all, and that's that she's not in the park at all, that she was abducted. Christina's mother believes that this is what happened to her daughter, and so do a lot of other people, and I think pretty much anyone who really does any deep digging into this case. Christina was described by her friends and family as being a very trusting person and that she would trust anyone until they gave her a reason not to. And so if someone approached her asking for help or directions, she wouldn't have thought twice about it. And they've even said that she probably would have gotten into a stranger's vehicle if they had offered her like a ride back to the camp or something like that. She really was that trusting of a person. But the OPP have insisted that there were no signs of foul play at all, and that this is just an open missing person case. Elizabeth was told by the OPP back in those first days, weeks, and months that they were looking into 60 possible leads, including interviewing those who were registered at the park at the time of Christina's disappearance and following up on anything reported to the OPP. One lead that was looked into and that has been mentioned was a lead that was called in by a man named Paul Gother? His name's Paul. Paul reported that he was sitting outside of his RV having his morning cup of coffee, and he was set up at the Rossport campground. When around 9 a.m., he saw a small woman coming down from the loop from the highway. He said that she looked like she could have been of Asian descent, but he wasn't positive, but she was wearing a hoodie, black pants, and running shoes, which he did remember. He didn't even think that much about seeing this lady until he heard about Christina's disappearance and heard what she was described as wearing, which he then clued in that that lady he's seen was wearing the same thing that Christina has been described as wearing. He's made it clear that he can't be 100% positive that it was her, but it was on his mind and bugging him enough that he decided to report it just in case, which is awesome of him. Just if you ever are in a situation like that where you think you might have a piece of information, but you really don't know if it's going to be useful, just report it. Don't leave it to yourself to make the decision if that tip is important or not. The police can do that. The proper people can do that because you literally never know. So this report was investigated, of course, but like all the others, it resulted with nothing as far as we know. A vigil was held for Christina at the falls on a cold Saturday in September, 1 month after her disappearance. About 50 people gathered along the boardwalk to the falls, including OPP Constable Keith Jones and Terrace Bay Mayor Mike King. Elizabeth, standing at the vigil for her daughter, looked out around the park and said, "If Christina's out there, I can't think of a more beautiful place for her to be." The friends and family of Christina held fundraisers to fund private searches for Christina. One search was on June 13, 2008. Officers went back into the park for a week-long search with a high-angle team scaling the cliffside for Christina's body, along with Canadian and American volunteers and dogs trained to detect human remains, cadaver dogs. Another search was in November of 2008, and it involved a team of 6 cadaver dogs, which were brought to investigate the area. According to search manager Jeff Hayes, I think it is, all 6 dogs detected the scent of human remains at the bottom of the White Sand Lake. All 6 dogs detected the scent of human remains at the Hewitson River, aka White Sand Lake, but the flow and depth of the river made any more investigating into this just too difficult. In total, there were 6 privately funded searches for Christina, and with Elizabeth exhausting all of her savings, fundraising money, Christina's trust fund, all the money she got from selling her home, and her son's university education fund, they had no more money to fund any more searches, and no answers, and no Christina. No privately funded searches have taken place since 2009. Christina was responsible and dependable. She was devoted to her family as she could, and also her religion. She was so trusting of everyone around her and so very kind-hearted. Christina also had 2 cats named Crystal and Oreo. Oreo had recently had a litter of kittens, but on Monday, August 6th, Oreo went missing, the same day Christina did, and Oreo has also never been found. And sadly, all of her kittens passed away. Christina will be missing for 15 years this summer. Christina Calayca's disappearance is still under investigation by the Nipigon Division of the Ontario Provincial Police. And as of 2022, it is still being looked into as a missing persons case. The government of Ontario has issued a $50,000 reward for information leading to her whereabouts as well. If you have any information whatsoever, you can contact the director of the Criminal Investigation Branch of the OPP at 1-888-310-1122 or 705-329-6111. Or your nearest police station. You can also contact Crime Stoppers as well, which is anonymous, by visiting their website. You can download the app, there's a number you can text, or you can call 1-800-222-8477. At the time of her disappearance, Christina Calayca was 20 years old. 5'2", she weighed around 125 pounds, was Filipino, and had black wavy hair and brown eyes. Christina was last seen wearing a blue hoodie, a maroon/purple striped shirt, black pants, and white running shoes. And that is all of the information I have on the case of Christina Calayca. Cases like this, I always end up just getting so obsessed over. It kind of reminds me of the missing 411 cases that take place in the United States. Just so little answers and so many questions. So just for the next few minutes, I'm just going to give my thoughts on the case. Let me know if you like when I do this or not. I probably won't do it for all of the videos, but sometimes I feel like I want to. I don't know. So what I think happened to Christina is I really do lean towards her getting abducted while out on her jog. With the Trans-Canada Highway just being right there, it just makes it for such an easy getaway. And then to be in Northern Ontario, like you could just drive off into the bush and hide out. There's just so many scenarios of that type that I can just come up with on the top of my head that's really what I lean towards the most with all of the information that we know. And I do think I lean towards this scenario the most because there's just nothing else to make me question another scenario more. I honestly don't think Eddie had anything to do with it, which a lot of people hate on Eddie. And I get it looked suspicious, he's the last one and stuff, but I really just don't think he had anything to do with it. Yeah, I just don't see Eddie being able to do something to Christina and then hide her body in as little as 3 hours. Yeah, unless it wasn't in that 3 hours, it was earlier, but I don't feel I don't know. Some people have thrown out the question of if the group collectively did something to her. Maybe she drank too much or something like that, and they got scared and they wanted to hide the body. But I just have a hard time believing that scenario as well. I just don't see this group of little 20-year-olds being able to pull something off like this so perfectly that no sign and trace of her has ever been found. No markings of a body being hidden, not even her body being found. Plus, they weren't from this area. They have never been there. That's quite a big stretch to go 14 hours or go 13 hours away and then hide a body absolutely perfectly, if you know what I mean. I also wanted to mention that the people in the nearby towns seem to get almost offended if you suggest that someone from their town had abducted Christina, since they're such a close-knit community and everyone knows everyone. And so the people in those communities tend to point the finger at the Terrace Bay Drag Fest community, since the locals say that they are loud and cause trouble, which, yeah, it's a car group. But I will throw it out there that I am quite biased when it comes to drag fest car people, because I actually love that scene, and I've met amazing people in that scene and at events like that. And so of course there is a few weirdos in every group that make the whole group look bad, but you can't just throw out the whole carton because one egg is cracked, if you know what I mean. And I do wonder about the body the cadaver dogs pointed to. Very curious about that, if there has been any recent, well, they say there wasn't any recent searches since 2009, so if there was any police searches or if they decided to go check that out, they could let us know. They could not. But yeah, I feel like at this point, figuring out what the dogs pointed to or getting the dogs out there maybe again to see if they point to it. It is 2022 after all. This happened back in 2007. The dogs pointed it out in 2008. A lot of years have passed, and I'm sure that there is some more decent technology that could get down there or something. Come on, throw a GoPro down there. Just fucking whip it in, Anyways, what do you guys think of this case? What do you think happened to Christina? Does anything stick out to you guys that I've talked about, or maybe that you know about this, or maybe anything that you know about this case I haven't mentioned? Does it stick out to you that other people don't seem to notice? I'm curious. Have you been to Rainbow Falls? And if you have been to Rainbow Falls, what are your thoughts on somebody going missing in this area? If you got something out of this video and you want to let me know, you can hit the like button. And if you want to hear more of the lesser known murder mystery and mayhem cases that go on here in Canada only, then I invite you to subscribe and hit that like button so that you're notified of my next unscheduled video. I really am trying to post once a week, I promise. Have a good weekend, everyone, or week, whenever you're watching this. And stay safe out there, and I will see you later, alligator. Bye.